A two-time graduate of North Carolina Central University, Leonardo Williams is the Chief Executive Officer and founder of the Phase 3 Group Incorporated, an academic achievement focused group that provides helpful accountability strategies effectively on education matters in the home, community, and schools. Mr. Williams possesses a broad portfolio for education policy, curriculum, mental health, and business development across North Carolina, the southeastern region of the United States, and the southern region of Africa. Mr. Williams and his wife, Zweli, also own the #1 restaurant in the city of Durham, North Carolina, Zweli's Piri Piri Kitchen. Being one of the most requested restaurants by Google, Duke University, UNC Chapel Hill, and several other big-name clients, economic entrepreneurship has become a conceptual avenue for financial sustainability. An advocate for great schools for all children, Mr. Williams is currently working to find solutions for turning around the bottom-performing 5% of schools in the state of North Carolina. He recently served as the chairman of the board of directors for the North Carolina Foundation for Public School Children, North Carolina's largest nonprofit foundation for public schools. Now he serves as the chair of the North Carolina Central University College of Arts and Sciences Advisory Board, establishing 2 successful endowments for student scholarships. In addition to his domestic endeavors, he and his wife also support the family business and the properties of Taika's Enterprises in Zimbabwe, Africa, one of the largest textile factories in the nation of Zimbabwe. So I want to welcome to the Musical Expressions series, not only my Kappa Kappa Psi, Zeta Sigma chapter, frat brother, ADP, but also my squad brother from the Order of the Marching Sound Machine, Mr. Leonardo Williams. Reginald Boney is a native of Durham, North Carolina, born to Reverend Raymond and Dr. Regina Boney. Reginald was educated in the Durham public school system. After graduating from Southern Durham High School, he furthered his education at North Carolina Central University, where he received a Bachelor of Arts degree in history with a concentration in African American studies. While attending North Carolina Central University, he was involved in several campus activities, such as the Marching Sound Machine, where he was a squad member of the Order, and he also played the trumpet. He's also a brother of the Zeta Sigma chapter of Kappa Kappa Psi National Honorary Band Fraternity Incorporated, Phi Nu Alpha Symphonia, College Democrats, the History Club, and the Association of the Study of African American Life and History. Reginald also holds a Master of Theological Studies degree from Duke University, where his thesis was entitled, In High Places, a Theological Critique of Systematic Racism in the United States. Reginald also holds a Juris Doctor degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill School of Law. While at UNC, Reginald served as the Vice President of the Black Law Students Association and as a Senior Editor on the Southern Journal of Policy and Justice for the Southern region. Reginald's experiences includes internships and externships at the Office of Governor Roy Cooper, the North Carolina Center on Actual Innocence, the Honorable Vince Rozier, and the UNC Youth Justice Clinic. Among his many accomplishments, Reginald is a proud member of the Durham Alumni Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. Above all achievements, Reginald is married to his college sweetheart, Latia. They have 3 children, Layla McKenzie, Skylar Jackson, and Summer Ray. I want to welcome to the Musical Expression series, my squad brother of the Order, brother of the Zeta Sigma chapter of Kappa Kappa Psi National Honorary Band Fraternity Incorporated, a brother of Kappa Alpha Psi, Mr. Reginald Boney.
Jeremy Collins, a native of Gardens, North Carolina, is a civil rights advocate and lawyer for justice and peace. He currently serves as the Director of Innovative Connectivity for North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper. Prior to this post, Jeremy served as Director Counsel of the Racial Equity Project and Advocacy Policy Council to the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. Jeremy is a servant. He's a proud father, a loyal Tar Heel, and a brother of the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. All right. All right. All right. Let's welcome our brothers coming in and speak to us. MBX. Just take your phones or your devices off mute and just go ahead and get a round of applause. Real quick.
Woo! Hey, good ones. Hey, to the good ones.
Hey.
The
And this one is very special. And having my fraternity brothers as well as my former drum majors, former students, and I'm extremely proud and blessed that I've even had you as students to watch you all as youngsters before you even had hair on your chin, to grow up to having all of these degrees, these JDs, these Esquires, business owners, entrepreneurs. So I'm extremely blessed to even have you all as friends, as well as former students, and then also brother Collins, even to know you. He failed to mention his bio. He's also a Marine. Once a Marine, always a Marine. He's not a soldier, he's a Marine. So he failed to mention all of his accolades, and I'm gonna hand it over. We've spotlighted these gentlemen, and we've talked about a lot of things as far as political action and why it's important to vote. And we're going to talk about some of these things and how they impact us. And believe me, they are qualified and more qualified than me to discuss these topics. And again, gentlemen, thank you. Really appreciate you coming on.
Can everyone hear me? Good. All right. Good. Leo and Jeremy, I don't know if you want to go ahead and unmute as well. We're gonna do this together.
What's going on, everybody? It's great to be here with you guys.
How y'all doing?
All right. Great to be here with you guys. It's good to see so many faces here as well. Especially, it's a bit special seeing so many students sitting where we were just a little while ago.
A little while ago. A little while.
Yeah.
And I want to say thank you again to Dr. Reed, Mr. Chalmers, for having us up here today. It's truly an honor to join you all. And I would also like to say it's very impressive. I've heard before the call that most of you guys have already either voted or you're planning to vote. So by show of hands, how many of you have already gone to the polls? All right, good. Yeah, that's good. That's awesome. If you have not, I'm pretty sure that you've been encouraged to go, and I just want to add to that. Make sure that your voice is heard, because your vote does count. It does matter. I do not care what anyone says. To the contrary, your voice does matter. And if it didn't matter as much, they wouldn't be trying so hard to suppress it. So know that your voice does matter, and we need everyone to go out and to vote. I'm not going to tell you how to vote, but I had a good friend of mine to recently tell me to vote your conscience, and along with that, vote your culture. So that's all I'm going to say. So I'm going to throw it over to you, Brother Williams.
Yeah. So, Dito, everything that Reginald just said, I had the most distinct honor just last Wednesday. I was standing here in my restaurant and I got a call. I didn't recognize the number, but they basically said, hey, how soon? Well, first of all, they said, hey, how you doing, Mr. Williams? I said, hello. They said, this is such and such, and we want to know how soon can you get to Nashville? It's like, wow, really? Nashville, what's going on there? I didn't know the debate was there. They said, well, the presidential debate is going on, and we'd really like it if you could come. Vice President Biden wants you there. I said, you got to be freaking kidding me. And someone from the background said, no, Leonardo, I'm not kidding you. And I said, is that Vice President Joe Biden? They said, yes. He said he's not going on stage unless you all are there. So we packed up, we rented a car, and we headed to Nashville. And we did press all day. And that evening, it was just surreal. I thought we were going to be in the balcony. But no, they walked us down, and I looked at the seating chart, and it said Ivanka Trump, First Lady Melania Trump, Tiffany Trump, Eric Trump, Leonardo Williams, Zwaley Williams, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, and Dr. Jill Biden and their granddaughter. So I got a chance to see these two individuals side by side, and I got a chance to see their body language and everything. And all of their verbal and nonverbal communication will tell me and can tell you how important voting is. And sitting beside, people who bask themselves in a culture that discriminate against others. Well, obviously, you know where I stand. It was very clear, that not everyone in the room was considered. And it just brought to realization so many things that need to be important again in our society, such as diversity and inclusion. So just being around that privilege in that room, what you see behind me is standing behind the moderator's seat, Kristen Welker, and I'm at the debate stage. So yeah, it was a surreal experience, but I got a chance to meet a lot of folks that have a lot of power in the political realm. Anheuser-Busch, they sponsor every presidential debate through the debate commission, and they got a chance to, they told me about how far their reach is, and so hopefully today I could just talk about that experience, talk about how politics work. And how important voting is, and how our vote generates, how our society is shaped around voting. Brother Collins.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Can y'all hear me? All right, cool. So to Dr. Reed, my dog, I appreciate the invitation. To my brothers, my friends as well, Brother Williams, Brother Boney, and all of you, all the students. I was excited too to hear that 99% of you have already voted. And it's a critical season. Like, you heard my bio. I spent a lot of my career working in the trenches around civil rights and social justice, and believe in the saying that to be a man is to be a martyr to a cause. So, I take that very seriously. Voting is really a demonstration of what you believe about yourself and what you believe about your community. If you don't have any faith in that, then you're not casting a vote. But I'm excited that much of our conversation is really about something more than that. The truth of the matter is that a lot of our decisions are siloed because so much happened before the primary election. And so we've got to work together to build an infrastructure that doesn't allow competent, qualified, excellent candidates of color to bow out of a race because they can't afford to stay in. I know where we are today, and I'm asking you to vote. I know most of you have, but if you haven't voted yet, don't vote for anybody who don't believe in science. Don't vote for anybody who don't believe in Black issues. Don't vote for anybody who wants to see kids die at the border. Don't vote for anybody who doesn't espouse the things that makes our communities flourish. I'm gonna get that out the way. However, on November 4th, we have to work, not just believe, but we have to work for a society that doesn't force the Cory Bookers and the Kamala Harrises and others to bow out of a race because there's money in politics and we just can't afford to stay there. So I don't want us to miss that, because we're gonna be stuck in a place in 4 years where we got 2 more old white men waiting to get our vote, and we trying to figure out what to do, but our community's interests were sacrificed in the process. Maybe I went too far, but I don't apologize for it. So that's my spiel. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to talk about all that we can be doing at the ballot box and beyond. But more than that, I love music and I love community. I love, how much we can learn from the intersection of HBCUs, musical excellence, and political participation. There's a real nexus there. And so I'm excited about the conversation. I'm gonna hand it off to whoever I'm supposed to hand it off next, but I appreciate being a part of this.
No, I mean, I think you brought up a really interesting point, especially when you're talking about money and politicians. I mean, that's really just kind of a small picture of a greater issue that we see even outside of politics, that we see. I know I saw it often when I was at North Carolina Central. They're just things that, like my grandma used to say, you know, money answers all answers all things. You can just do things when you have money, when you have funding, and that it's been the story of many Black politicians and many Black citizens, many Black people that getting ahead is obstructed because of the lack of funding, and usually that ends up turning against, you know, not in our favor. But like you said, voting is a way to kind of to go against that unfortunate, you know, phenomenon. And the reality is, we have to realize that voting is really just the threshold of what we want to do, right? So you want to encourage people to vote, but while we're encouraging people to vote, we also have to encourage them that voting is not the end all be all. That after voting occurs, there is another step. There is something else. Like, we have to continue the fight after we leave the polls, and that includes holding our government officials and politicians accountable, continuing to make sure that our voices are heard in our city council meetings, making sure that we are present in our communities. Voting is something that we have to do and that we must do, but it's not the only thing that we have to do. And especially when it boils down to how our historically Black colleges and universities are going to be, how they're going to be sustained. We have to make sure that our voices are heard first and foremost at the polls. But after that, we have to make sure that these politicians are not just using us as pawns in their political schemes, in their campaigns, but to hold them accountable and say, you said that you would do this. You said that you would increase funding for HBCUs, you know, where the money at? so that's I just want to make sure I threw that point out there, that we have to hold them accountable even after the election.
Yeah.
Yep. So one thing I've learned after being involved with politics much more lately, and what I'll say what I have learned is it has to be a new culture that we entrench ourselves into. Some of the most intense work politically is done when no one is looking. When no one is looking, just like, you know, we're trying to see, you know, if we can get this. I think it really hit hard when Barack Obama was running, but we were trying to get a Black president elected. Republicans weren't thinking about that, you know. And I know, of course, this is nonpartisan, but myself, individually, I don't think it's between Republican and Democrat anymore. It's between normal and crazy. So I'm speaking not on behalf of any institution or the university. I'm speaking on behalf of me, and my views. But, you know, folks are playing the long game. You know, they weren't thinking about, let's give them a token president or anything. They were thinking about, so how many people can we get on the courts? Because, yeah, this guy may win, but what's going to happen is about 20 years from now, all of the things that they build up now, we're going to have to, you know, knock all of that stuff out. And we're not going to be able to do it through legislation. We're going to have to do it through the courts, you know, and that's just a culture, you know, it's a culture. When I walked in the room, in the debate hall, it was 177 people in the room. Seven people were Black. And there were 3 Black men and 4 Black women, including the Black and Native American moderator. But about 95% of the room were old white men And this has been a culture that that demographic has been living in for centuries. And we're late in the game, you know, as a people. And this goes into everything that we as a people are affiliated with. So as Reggie is saying, you know, even when it comes to university funding, you know, we were a part of the Platinum Plan, which I find offensive. You know, when it comes to talking politics and African Americans, we automatically resort to, you know, criminal justice reform and poverty. Well, not all Black people are poor. Not all Black people are in the criminal justice system. So we are going to have to, as a people and as, you know, students now, get involved in the political culture from your perspective and change the narrative and control part of the narrative. And too long and too often have folks not been involved in politics until they hit about 30 years old. And that has to change. You know, the things that you may want in life is I won't say it's too late, but you could have gotten more if you gotten involved earlier. So the amount of hands that I just saw raised about who's voted already is really encouraging to see. The other thing is, you know, when it comes to opportunity, I own, you know, a restaurant here that's well known in the area here in Durham. We just acquired a building in Rocky Mount. We're next in line to open up a restaurant on Duke University's campus. We're about to have an online store selling goods in grocery stores. So we're doing all of these things, but I want to tell you part of that process. Part of it was going to Rocky Mount, getting involved with their city council and realizing how conservative they were. Getting involved with the committees, the Historic Preservation Committee, and getting to know those folks so they can be a bit more lenient, and then getting people to run against them and get on those committees so we can do things like change the front of the building that I just purchased. You know, so it's all about culture, and it's all in voting. It's all in the actual political culture. And you're right, Reggie, it is beyond voting. Voting is just the start. Voting is that snapshot, you know, opportunity to state your voice, you know, state your interest. But you're really just voting on what a particular candidate or a particular organization has set forward based on the people around them. So we have to start getting more engaged in this culture. And part of that is some things that I've taken, so that I've launched here in Durham. Bank Black Durham. You know, this is how we're going to use a Black bank to lead the conversation and increasing Black home ownership by 10% in 10 years, and increasing Black small business ownership by 25% by 2025. Another way is, you know, yeah, that's one example. But basically, we got to get involved and narrate our own culture.
You know, something that you all hit on. I wanted some students had a question. I have this question too. If I guess the framers, if you go back to, you know, our founding fathers of America, you know, the idea was that any citizen can serve, right? How do we explain the money piece? You know, where you hear where we see these ads where the gentleman in South Carolina says, hey, I need to raise this amount of money because they're beating me by this much in South Carolina. And then, okay, I need this much money to beat Lindsey Graham, and oh, we're this behind for this campaign or versus this other. So how is it about money if, you know, the original, like how you know, and I can't explain that when it's still about money, you know, because in reality it's almost like, well, if it's advertising, that means people can put any type of advertisement out there, and if you get enough money, and then is the advertisement or propaganda? So I shall mute.
Reggie, I see you want. I'm gonna let you go first, and then I'm gonna jump in on this.
Okay, so mine, you can probably dive in a little bit deeper than me. I'll just say it from the surface. The truth of the matter is everything comes down to money, and so that's just it's a reality in America that to be taken seriously in politics, you are going to have money. It's basically who can raise the most, because you use that for campaigning. And I won't say that the fact that anyone can run or become involved in politics is a myth. But I will say you will be jaded if you think that it doesn't take money, because it does. And so that's just a surface assessment where everything you said, Dr. Reed, was correct. And it's an unfortunate thing, because I know there are a lot of people who have great ideas and great political acumen, and they just don't have the funds to back their ideas. But Brother Collins.
Yeah, I got real thoughts about this. And I mean, not beyond real thoughts. I'm gonna take this in two different directions. The first, what I want to lay out just at the onset is something that my colleague and brother Van Jones says a lot. And we have to understand that we live between a founding dream and a founding reality. Okay. And so when you read the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, that document, whether you want to accept this or not, was not intended for everyone, right? And so, yeah, there's a thing that says if you're 35, you're supposed to be able to run for certain offices, and you're supposed to be able to participate in this way. But at the same time, there was a group of people who were excluding folks from ownership of homes, the ability to participate in voting. You know, like there has been this consistent duality of tracks in American culture. And so the simple answer to your question is, yeah, I know that's what they said, but they didn't mean that. Let me frame it to you a different way. And I'm just going to open up the visor a little bit here. It's a lot of us that are in fraternal, sorority, secret type organizations. And we all take a position that all are welcome to have interest in our organizations. Of course, we're non-hazing organ. That's not stuff that we do. We don't do that. We're not about that. We're about service, and we're about, if you with Leo and them, it's a social type situation. And, Brother Boney, I don't know I don't know, but in any event, I'm not involved in that. But what I know is we say a thing that's like, we don't haze. Of course, you got good grades. We want you to be a part of it. Now, that ain't real. It's not real, right? What's real is we want people who are like-minded to participate in the thing that we are a part of. The largely the all-white mafia that formed America thought the exact same way. Now, how does that translate to today? All we see is progress, resistance, brutality, re-entrenchment, repeat. That's what happens in America, right? And so we've got institutionalized, codified brutality and genocide that happens for some hundreds of years. There's a freedom one, and per capita, you got more Blacks and African Americans that are part of the Congress. And on the heels of that comes violence across the South, where Black codes are put in place. The only coup d'etat ever recorded on American soil happens in Wilmington, North Carolina in 1898. And then we move out of that into this era where many of our organizations were founded to create these centers of Black excellence and work for systemic change. And then we move into a place where there's the Great Depression, there's war. The country rewrites a constitution for it. Well, the country rewrites a codification or an agreement with itself called the New Deal in 1933 and 1934. But what is explicit with that New Deal is that if you were Black or brown, you could not take advantage of it. And so if you're a Black man returning from war, you couldn't use the GI Bill to buy a house. If you were a person of color, Social Security was not extended to you, right? Now, there's a law that says that we're coming through the greatest depression of all of that America has ever known. right? But if you are a white person, you could use the New Deal and go to college. If you are a black person, don't ask me about no damn college, right? And so when you say like, how can they say this and do that? I'm like, look, man, it's been that way the entire time. Let's fast forward a little bit in history. Like when we talk about, we move out of the Depression, and we see African Americans and people of color a part of this civil rights and social justice movement. You know, we sleep on that, but like between 1935 and 1956, right? That's real brutality for communities of color. And then between 1955 or 54 with Brown versus Board of Education, 1964 with the Civil Rights Act, and 1965 with the Voting Rights Act, these are laws that are intended to largely eradicate brutality, not just to allow the franchise. Because you can't, if you think about Brown versus Board of Education as just a opening for Black kids to go to school, I'll remind you to look at the videos of Black kids being maimed and brutalized as they were trying to walk into a building, right? The Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, think about people being strung up in trees because they were trying to just register folks to vote. All that is a resistance to progress. It was a, I know there's this law in place, but like, we didn't mean that you Negroes get to do that. Right. And so to my brother Williams' point, and to brother Boney's point earlier, this vote, you know, and I'm going to use this language, Dr. Reed, because you said the franchise, you said the framers. What we have to understand is that the Constitution is intended to protect a community's ability to elect their candidate of choice. That's the intent of the Help America Vote Act, one person, one vote, the Voting Rights Act with all those sections in place, not just Section 2 and a flail in Section 4 and 5. You know, all the provisions of the Voting Rights Act are intended such that communities are able to both coalesce and elect their candidate of choice. And I will submit to you, if you're just choosing between the two people who made it out of the primary, that ain't your candidate of choice, right? Money obstructs the ability for communities to elect their candidate of choice. And so, yes, you got to be involved beyond the primary. Yes, you have to hold your candidates or your elected officials accountable. But also, yes, you have to starve out a system that means survival of the richest. We have to starve out that system. And what that means is, because I don't want to speak esoterically, that means in North Carolina, or let's talk about North Carolina. That means that when you have good people like Keith Sutton who are running for superintendent of public instruction, but your organization or your school invites all the other candidates to come and we give them all equal airplay, and it's like we endorse somebody, but there's another brother or sister in that race, just understand that you have neutralized a community asset. And we got to think about it that way. And if we're not thinking about it that way, our time, our money, our attention, they're all equal. They're finite resources. And once we say it from our university or our NAACP chapter or our Divine Nine organization that, you know, of course, Divine Nine, we can't really endorse anybody, but within our different organizations, when we say we endorse someone, that means we're telling our community that this is who we've picked, but we've also weakened our value and diluted our community's interests. And so we got to be smarter. It's not just about the vote. The vote is important. Let's do that. And it's not just about holding people accountable. Let's do that too. But if we're going to have the ability to elect our candidates of choice, then we have to protect those interests, like Leo says, when no one's watching. And we got to protect those interests to keep it. If that means fully funding those candidates before we allow those other interests to proceed, that's what we got to do. But that's the intent here. We have to undo the founding reality and try to align it with what was expressed as the founding dream.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And I mean, I appreciate like the timeline that you just laid out with all that information, because I think that when you have like that full context you can enter into the political process with the correct mind frame. And so, like, for instance, when you talked about the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act in 1964 and 1965, respectively, it really just made racism unfashionable publicly. That's what those laws did. It said we can no longer lynch you from a tree or call you the N-word now. Now we'll say, we'll push the rhetoric of law and order. And it changed the language. It made it race neutral. But we have to be informed voters. I saw a question talking about being an informed voter. And part of being an informed voter is, of course, knowing who the candidates are, who the people running are, but also knowing like the language that they use and the rhetoric that they use, because it will tell you everything you need to know. And people use language, codified language in politics to really, we call them dog whistles, but to speak to a certain demographic, a certain population, to get the political result that they want. And for example, I saw a commercial the other day with the president saying, "I'm going to be the president of law and order." Basically, what that means, what that looks like on the surface is, I'm going to make sure that criminals will get their just due. We're going to be a safe society, and we're going to live happily, waving our red, white, and blue flags. That's what that sounds like on the surface. But underneath that, when you dig a little deeper, it's a dog whistle, it's a racist dog whistle saying that I am going to police Black communities. And I'm going, because Black communities is where all the crime comes from. That's really what law and order means when it's used in that instance. Or I heard another example. I'm going to make your suburban communities safe again. That's another dog whistle. That's the language. And so you have to know the history to know how the language changed. So then when these politicians are out here just talking, you can recognize some of their talking points as being connected to those points in history that Brother Collins was talking about. And so, and it's really important that you do that, just not even at the federal level, but realizing that our voting for the president is directly tied on that same ballot. It's directly tied to who you're going to vote for in your communities. And I promise you that they will have a huge effect on your life. I will argue more so than the president ever would. Like, you need to know who your city council people are. You need to know who, the judges are going to be in your community. These are these type of elections, like municipal elections, that's the word I was trying to think of, are very important for the uplift of our community. And so don't just look at Trump and Biden, but look at who the people are in your respective towns and cities, wherever you come from, because that's really where what your life is going to be based on. They directly have an effect on your life.
I'm gonna make 3 quick points. I'm gonna get out of here because I feel like I've been talking too much. But I want to highlight a few things. One, North Carolina this year has the opportunity to elect at least the second only ever African American in the history of our state to the council of state. In the history of North Carolina, there's only been one Black person to ever be elected to the council of state. And that is, council of state is the governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, insurance commissioner, agriculture commissioner, that cabinet of people, the treasurer, the state treasurer. So there's only the labor committee, right? There's only ever been one. He just so happened to have been an Omega brother. Rest in peace, Ralph Campbell. But my point here is this. Bro, how does a state that's been in existence for this long have only one person elected, one African American elected to the council of state? And if you think it's not important, not only do those individuals serve in their individual constitutional capacities, the council of state votes on everything from if North Carolina acquires property, that's a very broad term. If Cherokee County comes a little bit larger and if we acquire land, the council of states got to approve that. Every time my boss, Governor Cooper, decides on certain executive orders, like the one we just released yesterday around extension of rent and utilities assistance, we have to get concurrence from the council of state. Also, when the state of North Carolina decides that we're going to go from a firing squad to an electric chair to lethal injection, the council of state is the group that votes on the instrumentalities that we receive to actually carry out state executions. That's my first point I want to make. So like what Brother Boney says exactly right. You need to know who's down that ballot beneath the president and even the governor. Second point I'll make is this. I was really fortunate to have a great property law teacher, Carol Brown, shout out to her. Like this sister was tough. But one thing she started every class with was follow the money and like, don't forget the context. First, one of the first laws ever codified or ever approached by the U.S. Supreme Court was this case Johnson v. McIntosh. And I'll never forget this case because essentially I'll bore you. I won't bore you with the details, but Johnson v. McIntosh essentially said that if you did not have a tie to the crown, and this was in like, the 1400s, if you didn't have a tie to the crown of England, that you could not own land. You were nothing more than a squatter on American soil. What that means was Europeans came to America, found Black and brown people on the land. They was like, nah, this ours. They were like, yo, we've been living here. We've been here the whole time. They were like, y'all ain't connected to the crown. So like, this is our land. And the courts wrote a law that basically said that. And then when these natives rebelled against that, they were like, nah, we need to be a nation of law. We are a nation of laws. And if y'all are going to protest that, then you need to utilize the law to like fight that. So like y'all make the laws that harm us. And then we got to like use that same tool that you created to undo that. What happens then is this. We were talking about history a moment ago, Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act. As Americans, as Black Americans and brown Americans move out of a period of actual slavery, we move into a period of mass incarceration. And so that's the re-entrenchment. And then as we begin to integrate schools, we create tracks within schools, and then we create layers of education that include private, parochial, and charter schools that weaken the dollar that go into public schools. Because what happens is we're not gonna all do this together. I know we all supposed to have a sound basic public education, but that was never intended for all of us. And so we got to create new avenues to make that happen. So you can talk about how every parent should have a choice. Parental choice is a dog whistle like Law and Order. And that's a conversation in our in Black and brown communities that we don't like to have. But it's a dog whistle conversation when you hear Black and brown people talk about parental choice. That is a narrative that was given to us by white people. And I'm just being honest, right? It's a narrative that was given to us by people who don't look like us, to basically say, don't you want your child to have, don't you want the ability to choose where your child goes to school? When in reality, we should be saying, don't you want all schools to be excellent? Don't you want all schools to be a place where no child would not want to be? And so what happens is we have these schools that underperform, and then we make that argument about parental choice, but it was a narrative that was designed to create that, and then we carry it out by further marginalizing those spaces. But that's nothing but a continuation of like mass incarceration and two different societies that we create in our public education system. Everybody ain't gonna like that, but like I got time today. I got time.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Gosh, you said a lot right there, man. And it really hit home for me, Jeremy, because I worked on that policy, the ISD, and I was amongst the team, the bipartisan team, where they said, "All right, try and make this good for North Carolina." And that was my first time at the state level, seeing how just folks that have been identified way down the ticket, just out of the blue, just, all right, we're going to have you run for state superintendent. And they get there, don't really know what they're doing, but they are the designee for a long stretch of, of political culture for one ideology. And they get in there and they don't know what they're doing, and they're making all of these massive decisions, and they're using all of those dog whistles. I witnessed a town totally just be destroyed, their education system. Small town, could not fight the system back. They basically, we had this policy. They said, this can be used for all public schools. We're going to take this model and utilize it for public schools. Once we did all of the work, all of the data, all the analytics, it was then literally one person walked in the room and said, I spoke with Phil Berger. We're going to do this with the policy. I literally resigned from that on that same day. But I saw what you're just talking about, Jeremy. I saw it happen in person in front of me. And I was watching all of these people say, well, I want to be able to choose where my kid goes to school. And they don't really know what that means. And then we take, into just piecing off a little money here and there, 10 million here, 10 million there. Okay, now we have 50 million. We're going to put this into the opportunity scholarship. And it's just totally breaking down the public structure. So we create this problem and then we complain about the problem that was created. That's government, and I want to get back just to the original question of the money. So for me, I interpret that as how far your reach will be. That money is going to determine how many people you can put your presence in front of, how many people can you pay to pass your message on, and how many people can you also know. Actually, how much money you raise can also impact how much people actually respect you in this world. So I'm obviously getting involved a lot politically. And I had a meeting yesterday, and this works on both sides of the aisle. I had a meeting yesterday morning, and it went like this. We're interested in joining the ideas that you've been projecting, Leo. If you decide to run for X position, you can consider us raising $80,000 for you. Now, the average race for this particular position is normally about $30,000. So if you do raise this much money, this is the type of respect you're going to start out with, and it's going to get national attention. I didn't even know these guys, and they're coming to me saying these things, and it was overwhelming for me, But it's like you unfortunately, you do have to sometimes play the game in order to beat the game, and we've been doing that for a long time. So we just had a whole history lesson. I was getting goosebumps just listening to all of that. What my brothers were just talking about, but it's so true. And that's what I mean by just bringing this full circle about being engaged in the political culture. You can't just vote and then just go away. Vote, make sure you get to know the people who you voted for and find out their affiliation and what their influence is. Everybody has an agenda. And one thing I've learned in this, good and bad people all can smile kindly.
I completely agree with you. And one thing, I see a question by Antini Richardson, says, after the election, how can we stay politically active? And to your point, Leo, I also think that one thing that we have as young Black people, you have to remember that your voice has value and that you can participate in the political process and have something to contribute, because a lot of people don't think that they do, but you actually do. And no change has really happened in America that has been significant without people stepping out to make sure their voice was heard. Like, it's always been, if you just think about the civil rights movement, it was pushed by young Black people who were just saying, we're tired of the way things are. Know that your voice has weight and that you do have something to contribute. A lot of people, a lot of times, and I'm just gonna talk, this goes beyond politics, and this is just me just wanting to give a word of encouragement to some Black HBCU students. This is how it goes. You graduate and you go into the world, you're in this bubble for 4 years, an HBCU bubble, and it's the best thing in the world. It's 4 years of your life where you are not considered a minority, an affinity group, an afterthought. Everybody's Black. The chancellor Black, the dean Black, the professor Black, the football team Black, the cheerleaders Black. Everybody's Black. It's for us, by us. but then you graduate and you go out in the world. Now, we know that our HBCUs do prepare us intellectually to deal with racism, but the reality is you have to believe it yourself. Because what happens is a lot of times imposter syndrome is real and it'll set in. And but you have to know that your voice has weight and you have something to contribute. Because the reality is there are a lot of our white counterparts who are engaging in the political process and they do not have high political acumen. There is great white mediocrity that takes place in the political field. These people who are being elected are not smarter than you, okay? I don't care where they went to school. I don't care where they come from. You have to know that you have the capability of bringing something to contribute to the political processes, whether it be in your city, in your town, on that level. If you want to go to the state level, whatever it is, know that you have what it takes and your voice matters because you have a perspective that needs to be heard, and it will continue to need to be heard. That we have to move the beat of America, or I should say it like this: the landscape of America and the tempo of America moves faster than the politics of America. But a lot of the catching up that happens is because of Black young voices, and it has always been that way throughout American history. So just know that you have to get involved, go attend your city council meetings, volunteer for somebody, canvas for someone, but just make sure that you get attached and know that while you are there, your presence has value. I know that can be broad, but that's what I have to say about that.
No, Reggie, I just want to highlight, just reiterate one thing you just said. Our civil rights leaders were younger than you and I are right now.
Yeah.
Our civil rights leaders, students that are on this call right now, they were your age. Like we're old compared to their leader, their mentors at the time. Like they were your age, and they were not waiting on their turn. And this is something that we got to be honest with ourselves about in the Black community and communities of color. We do a poor job. We suck at succession planning. Right here in Durham, love Mickey Michelle, love him to death. I graduated from Central, and the School of Education is named after him. He is 90-something years old. And he just got out of office. Just got out of office. And it's not knocking him, but it's like, what happens when our older leaders, I mean, this sounds bad, but what happens when they die off? And I keep asking my friends, like, what is still being done? Like, in Congress, when Congress is filled with, folks that are in their 70s and 80s, how are they leading us when the growing population in this country is a heck of a lot younger than them? Like, they're asking the Facebook CEO, like, so how do you message someone or protect them? It's stupid, simple things that we don't even think about. It's just second nature to us. And they're supposed to be writing the laws for us. So we are progressively moving backwards. We're progressively moving backwards based on who's leading us. So it's up to us and up to you guys to get engaged unapologetically, confidently, courageously. And the other thing is, and I was going to say this earlier, get you a savings account and put $5 or $10 a month in that savings account. And title that savings account political donation. Because money is the American language. All right. It goes back to how far would your reach be when you run for office or support someone that is running for office? Play the game in order to beat it. All right. It's an unfortunate reality. Get you a savings account, and when, in every election, you take a little bit of that money and you just make your donation and you say, I'm committing to this. I'm giving you a donation. You're going to listen to what I got to say. Because that's what, Tom Tillis just got, $500,000 from pharmaceutical companies, and he's voted 7 times 7 times to get rid of the ACA. Now, next month, I'll possibly be testifying to the Supreme Court about protecting the ACA. And look who they just put on the courts.
Can you explain to them what the ACA? Because some students may not understand.
Yeah, sorry about that. So the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, or AKA Obamacare, where basically they created a market concept to where you can just get. It's almost like you order food on Grubhub, but you can go online and you can order your healthcare. You know, and I'm simplifying it a lot, of course, but basically they created a market where you can get healthcare, and you were accessible to multiple doctors, multiple services. It was not the best system, but it was a good start. And it was meant to be the foundation of providing healthcare for every American. Unfortunately, people who have the greatest healthcare in the world are voting for us not to have healthcare. Now, a prime example of that, I own a restaurant. I have a lot of people that are employed, and I see hundreds of people a day in here. I need to get tested for COVID often. So I go get tested, and every 5 to 6 days, I find out whether I have COVID or not. And so far, thankfully, I've been negative for all tests. However, when I went to the debate, I found out my results in 18 minutes. How is it that we have the capability of producing a test that lets you know in 18 minutes, but majority of Americans under a certain salary, range has to wait 5 or 6 days? And that is the American way. And that is what we have to change. And we have to think big. We can say, you know what, I want every American to be able to get tested for COVID and find out in 18 minutes. You can set that vision and we can go forth with it. And somebody that's going to be in suit and tie is going to say, well, that's going to be expensive and who's going to pay for it? And the tax is going to have to be raised. No, that's all BS. Basic stupidity.
That brother's right. I would be remiss if I didn't say this because I don't want to lose this point. We've been talking about dog whistle language and what's said and then done behind closed doors. The dog whistle terminology of our day is reopen the economy. That is a dog whistle term. If you are a Black or brown person and you're repeating that, understand that you got your own, that's a personal interest or you want to do your thing. I get it. I went by Zueli's about a month ago, I think it was. I text you, I was like, yo, look at what I got. I want to support my dog more than anybody else. I want him to be open. But I also, when I walked in there, social distance, ain't nobody in there. I know his business is hurting. At the same time, I know he's committed to all of our safety. This was the same dude that he might not tell you, but he was handing out food at McDougal Terrace when nobody else was paying attention. This is the same guy who, when families were hurting at the beginning of the pandemic and throughout, his restaurant was on the streets, like making this happen. And so a lot of us are sacrificing, and I've watched him sacrifice more. Reggie, similarly, like in his third year of law school, not knowing what was going to happen, at the end of the thing. But people are sacrificing. But I want to tell you this. I tweeted this, and then I don't never retweet myself. But this is the one time I've ever done it. Last year around October, I made this comment on Twitter, and I was like, we are distracted by entertainment and excess. And that distraction keeps us from having that level of clarity around the issues that are of greatest importance to our community. COVID, I could not have imagined in October that COVID would happen in January. And when I tell you that all the people who want us to reopen, and they mean it in a way that you and I don't mean it, because you and I, we want to be able to go back to the movies and shoot ball and go to and go to the football game, and we want to be able to take our lady out to dinner and this, that, and the third, right? The people who are out here railing open back up, what they're saying is this thing is forcing us to deal with social and political and health and educational inequality and we sick of talking about it. Like, we want to go back so that we don't have to focus on this anymore. We don't have to like deal with the fact that, like, you know, all of us are hurting from this, particularly marginalized communities. And so like, I want to let you know that like the dog whistle terminology of our day is open back up. And if you pay attention to the people you hear saying that, like it'll make a whole lot of sense to you. And then please don't repeat that, because we got to take your black card from you after you do that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, goodness. I'm glad you all spoke to that, because I think it's important to note that, you know, as a HBCU, we all must understand why these institutions were founded. These institutions exist because, number one, there was a time that, you know, African Americans, Black people weren't allowed or to have an education, and if there were schools, weren't allowed to go to school with people who were non-African American or white people. And that's, you know, the way it was. So it's important to know and realize that history, and to hear you all speak on that, and how, you know, where we are now, where we see a lot of HBCU, like, you know, like our band program, multicultural. A lot of our HBCUs have really been integrated. Could you all speak to, how can I frame this? I've noticed, with taking a sit back from looking at the news, which is often called the fake media, and then looking at college students and looking at how their critical thinking is developing and how to disseminate certain things, because you hear the word liberal being weaponized and the word conservative being taken in another context, where you can talk to, where I can talk to someone and someone else can have totally polarizing views, and then you talk to them and you find out you have a lot in common. You know, how do you, you know, tell college kids who like guns, but then they're at a HBCU, they, you know, they agree with this, they don't really understand affordable health care, they don't understand Title III funding, which comes to the HBCU to keep it open, they don't understand things, looking back at the history of HBCUs, like the reason why, from a money aspect, why Division I football is happening, but HBCUs might not even be able to start. Could you all, like, I guess, speak to some of those things that we have in common and those things that make us different? And I guess it still goes back to the money.
I was literally about to say, well, the one thing we do have in common, or that both sides have in common, is that money is king. But no, I will say, like, this definition, this is what I think of when I think of the terms like conservative and liberal, just to kind of talk about differences, I guess, and my brothers can jump in at any point. But when I think of conservatives, I think of trying to preserve something, conserve something. That's literally what it means. You're trying to hold on to something. And so the question is, when someone, identifies themselves as being a conservative, the question you should ask is, well, what are you trying to conserve? And then that can open up an entirely different conversation with the good old days, making America great again, trying to conserve a time in which things seem more simple, and they only seem more simple because America didn't recognize plurality or diversity. Being liberal, the term is, when I think of it, I just think of being more open to including people who were not included before. And so what happens is those terms are used, to attack, but the reality is, and I hope I don't make anybody mad, as Black students on the HBCU campus, it might do you some benefit to realize that we as Black people have been used by pawns on both sides, on the conservative side and the liberal side. Like I said, when my first comment was, money connects everybody in America, capital is king. But what we cannot forget in 2020 is that Black people were capital. We were literally people's capital, and it hasn't changed. We're still capital. We're like money that they use back and forth, and so they just use us in different ways. So as you're going to Fayetteville State, and learning to think critically. Remember that there are some differences. I'm not saying that everybody's the same. There are differences in being conservative and in being liberal. But there are also some things that are common that do not work to your benefit as Black students.
I agree with Brother Boney. I will add, I guess, a layer to that. And in my experience, even that definition that he gave, which is an accurate one, if any of you study law in the future, you'll find that one of the two most important phrases is "it depends," and so yes, generally speaking, his characterizations of conservative and liberal are true, but then there's pockets in America, in North Carolina, where let's think about the idea of like socialized medicine. That is traditionally a antithetical with conservative values, right? But what if I told you that in places like Massachusetts, Vermont, even in a place called Marshall, North Carolina, which is in Madison County, where there is nobody who looks like you in that county. I've been there several times and I ain't met one yet. But what if I told you they have businesses there that if you work for that company, they pay for your health care and they pay for you a stipend to live there? Because some of it is about community. So when you see people say things like, well, I have conservative values, or I believe that somebody ought to be able to pick themselves up there by their bootstraps, or I believe that, like government shouldn't be big, it should be small. What they're really saying is, like we discussed earlier, between the founding dream and the founding reality, I just believe all these things should not be extended to people beyond my community. Not to, you shouldn't be able to take advantage of these things. And what I have found is that you can be, like Dr. Reed said, a person who, person of color, like you might love guns. You might love things that traditionally, the majority population would advocate. But the difference is many of us draw a line between civil rights and civil liberties. And civil liberties are about what you are able to do. We have a saying in my church that is that essentially that our liberties shouldn't come before all of our security or all of our ability to live in a safe community, right? And so conservatives prioritize individual liberty, right? Whereas in you and I, you might want to own an AR-15, but you know that like more guns don't make us all safe. And I know I'm touching on some people right here, but that's okay. My point though is, I know, dog, you ain't have to identify yourself. I was gonna let it happen, man. But my point is this: like we have to come to a place in our society where we prioritize all of us over the things that each individual wants to advance. And when I tell you that, like, if you look at the rhetoric, if you look at what 45 is saying, and then you look at what Joe Biden is saying, you can align the two different narratives, right? No, who should tell you that you got to wear a mask? Who should tell you to do what the whole time? Like, this is about protecting us all versus being an individual. We all can identify with some level of that as well. And so like that too plays into that conservative liberal narrative, for what it's worth.
I like that. That's broken down. And the point earlier that Mr. Boney brought up, there was another question in the chat, and I think it lost my screen. Do you see it, Mr. Chalmers?
Yeah, I was
Okay,
gonna say, yeah, we have another question in the chat. A student asked, how can we ensure as students at an HBCU to make sure funding is available for students that may not be as fortunate as others?
And you know what, that I think that's if you can explain what's been called, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, entitlements such as Title III, some of those funding that come to HBCUs. If you could explain that, I guess, to the students a little bit better.
But I want to tie that, and I'll let my brother in policy go a little deeper into it, Brother Collins. But I want to tie that back to stacking the courts. And what I mean by that is the what do you call it? I'm losing my thought here. The affirmative action. Is it affirmative action? Is that the right terminology, Reggie? Well, basically,
Where you, we'll see.
I think I think where basically like, it was about Harvard had a case or whatever. But anyway, how I tie this back to the courts is through these conservative views, you'll hear someone say, well, we have a system where everybody can be admitted, when we obviously know there are systems in place that prevent some from being admitted, or it'll not necessarily prevent from being admitted, but allow for there to be subjectivity. Now, when it comes to funding, that practice is entrenched all through those veins. It happens often. So, I know a lot of conservatives say, I pulled myself up by my own bootstraps, and they try to say that's what everybody else should do as well, ignoring the fact that they had a wealth of privilege granted to them that they may not even realize. So how you can ensure is one, obviously you vote to state your voice, but two, this is something that we were guilty of at Central as well. And many universities, we're in a bubble. And I'll tell you something that's going on in Durham right now is there's a heightened level of violence, gun violence. And this is a little bit embarrassing, but the chancellor and students had to come to the city hall, the city council meeting, and say, please do something. A bullet just went through my window and I'm a student at NCCU. And the chancellor was pleading the city council and the mayor to please do something. And there's this organization that targets gun violence. And they're saying, hey, we'll offer this service to your city for free for 6 months. And our liberal city council members are still sitting on it saying, we want to make sure that this is an equitable service and all the other excuses they're giving, So basically, the way you can tackle that, to answer your question, is get involved on your campus, but also outside of your campus. Your university is in a city, and that city has an institution of government. And there is nothing holding you and your colleagues and your peers from getting involved with those institutions because they have an impact on you. I'll tell you, Duke University runs this city. They run this city, and their alumni is heavily entrenched. Reggie's part of them. They run this city.
Sorry.
But seriously, be involved in your student organizations on campus. But hey, the band is a student organization. The band has numbers. When you show up in numbers, if you want something, just say, look, this is my MBX coalition, and we demand X, Y, Z. So let's say you want more street cameras around the campus. You can go to the city council and say, this is what we want. And they may look at you and laugh, but then when you come in numbers and then your coalition as the band go back to the university and you go to the student activities board, you go to the SGA, and you go to the fraternities and sororities and the faculty, and then you come back with about 2,000 people, now they're going to start listening to you. And that's the way it works. That's how you can influence your local government. That's how you influence your state government and on up nationally.
Man, I appreciate how you brought that point up about student activism. One of the issues that I've had with my colleagues, I started as a young college professor, and to know that all of my colleagues were a part of the civil protest movement of the 60s. And a lot of them are now deans or older faculty. And oftentimes, I hate to put it out there, want to suppress the student voice or try to control the student voice. But all of these movements that happened in the past, like they keep going North Carolina A&T's campus, that statue of those 4 gentlemen, those were students that went to that Woolworth counter. And there is strength in numbers and definitely, being civil about it, being professional, representing yourself well, not tearing stuff up, and of course, that's a whole different conversation because I'm not gonna comment on that. But I that's something I haven't seen, but students to speak their voice, to get these things as Mr. Williams expressed. Mr. Chalmers.
Yes. So, okay. So to that question that we just asked, do you all, Mr. Collins or Mr. Boney, you want to expand on that?
Yeah, 2 quick points. One,
Okay, great.
What we were talking about a moment ago was essentially entitlements. I was really fortunate when I had an internship and an externship and worked at the Legal Defense Fund and got to work on Fisher versus Texas. And so what you're talking about when Brother Williams talked about Harvard had a system, the University of Michigan first had this public school system. And what happens is this is where majority students sue a university almost like a reverse racism claim and say the university has put a system in place that allows it to account for race, and their accounting of race to kind of dismantle racism actually functions as reverse racism against me. And so this young lady, Abigail Fisher, sued the University of Texas. Of course, she lost. It goes back to Brother Boney's point earlier. She was a mediocre student who and the record reflected that she wasn't even eligible to be a student at the University of Texas anyway. However, this is where, again, affirmative action laws, the Constitution says you can't use race to remedy race. And so you come up with these kind of blind criteria to get at kind of remedying racial bias. And then even when you're successful, the majority class says, well, wait a second, that's reverse racism, and I'm gonna sue you and try to win on those grounds. And so those type of racial entitlements is what they call them, or any type of admissions process that uses race in a manner that favorably considers students of color. It creates this level of entitlement. But the question is about something a little bit different, which is how can we essentially ensure resources for marginalized students or marginalized populations to be able to attend universities, right? And so, yes, being involved is an important thing, but to peel back the veil a little bit here, every year in the North Carolina legislature, when they're deciding about resources that go in different places, there's a gentleman's agreement, if you will, that social issues will be handled after corporate and budgetary matters are decided upon, right? And so one of the things that, Brother Williams talked about, Mickey Mishaw, who was, when the Democrats were in control of the legislature, he was the appropriator for the state. He was over the state budget from the legislative point of view. And one of the things that we would do if we wanted to try to get something done in the social justice space around education or criminal justice or funding for HBCUs was to say, look, Black caucus, minority caucus, don't make any deals with the legislature until they appropriate funds in the areas that we want to. Don't put the social issues on to the very end. Deal with the social issues first, and then come back and talk to us about incentives for Lenovo or IBM or Cisco. Because what happens is once they've made those deals with those corporations, you think they care about giving money to NCCU or Fayetteville State or A&T? And so the strategy has to be, yes, you got to get involved at your local city council. You got to get involved with what's happening in your community. But we have to have a corporate strategy. And when I say corporate, I mean like the way we talk about worship, like all of us. We have to have a strategy that prioritizes all of us. And so that means we got to withhold our participation until our demands, until our needs are met. And that's one specific way that we can do that. Prioritize social issues, social programs, funding, and allocations for marginalized or minority communities, and then we'll deal with that other stuff later on. Truth be told, CRE gonna take care of itself. They don't need legislative incentive, but our HBCUs do, and that's one that is the direct way to make sure you get that funding for Black schools.
See, that's why he needed to go.
Yeah, and are you familiar with because I've mentioned to the students several times about, and even former students, because Leo, Mr. Williams and Boney were benefited from a Title III grant, which was considered an entitlement, or it was federal funding. That all of those instruments that NCCU still have was written by that Title III grant that I wrote, which was, I think, came up to maybe over all those years, over about $10 million. How does that voting and all that connect to that funding, or versus, we hearing about how all of this money was given to HBCUs versus how it can be cut?
Well, so first of all, North Carolina's annual budget is $24 billion. $10 million to NCCU or Fayetteville State in the grand scheme of things is nothing. It's drop in the bucket. Like, that's like we went down to the store and spent $10, right? And so how is it connected? Well, it's connected because the decision makers, who handle appropriations. So you hear about, shout out to our frat brother, our friend, Zach Hawkins, Representative Zach Hawkins from District 31 right here in Durham. You hear about people running for the state house and the state senate. What you don't hear about is all of them are on a committee. And so long as Republicans have been in control, they hold out a advantage or a majority on every committee. And so the budget is a line item. Those grants are decided upon by legislators. And so voting on who gets into the legislature is a direct vote on who's going to be sitting in that closed budget allocation room when they're saying, HBCUs need X amount of dollars. And don't let anybody fool you. It's not charity. It's not a handout. If anything, like, this is money that's owed to the universities who have contributed far more than we take away from the state. And like, I can't not talk about Senator Shaw from Fayetteville State, Alma Adams, Mickey Mishaw, Larry Hall. The list goes on and on. Like, I don't know if I said Charlie Danley, but like we're talking Dan Blue. People who will basically stand up in the legislature and be like, I'm not voting for shit until we deal with this issue. Right. That's what it's got to take. That's exactly what it takes. Anything short of that it doesn't meet the needs of our community. And I wish this was like more formulaic, but it's not. It's really not. It literally is a prioritization and people willing to stick together and fight for it. And so who you vote for, my brother, Zach Hawkins, he's about to go into his second term. He stays in there a little bit longer. He gets on the appropriations committee, and he becomes the chair of appropriations. That's the difference between Elizabeth City State, his alma mater, getting prioritization in a lot of those conversations. Because trust and believe, my alma mater, UNC Chapel Hill, if we got $10 million in those types of grant, we'd be crying. Like, we'd be like, who, y'all left us out? Like, y'all gonna do us like that? But they try to make us feel guilty for like receiving those funds. But there's the correlation right there.
Or another thing I've noticed, and you can correct me if I'm wrong or speak to it, but there also seems to be, even with the funding of HBCUs in North Carolina, a priority. A priority to certain HBCUs, or like you'll see more HBCUs. And I've created a theory in my head. I don't know how scientific it is, But so, and those being the two largest, A&T and North Carolina Central, will oftentimes get funding. And I see that as white people trying to pacify the white politicians trying to pacify or check off, you know, oh, we've given to HBCUs now. But, you know, if we're going to advocate for HBCUs, I think like we have to make sure that we hold them accountable and say, no, all HBCUs need more funding. And so, and you know, we can go back in history to why that might even be the case, to A&T and Central being the alternatives to North Carolina State and UNC. You know, we don't want you coming to North Carolina State's agricultural program, so just go on to Greensboro. We'll give them a little funding. We don't want you going to Carolina's law school, so go on to Durham and go to NCCU's law school. So we'll make sure that they have a little more, but we're not really for the cause of HBCUs. We're really for the cause of you staying out of our PWIs. And that's what we have to, I think we have to, that's another point that I think is present.
I wish I hate to do this. I wish I could stay, but I got to roll. I love the conversation. I got another meeting, and I got to peace out.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Appreciate you coming in.
But if there's anything I can do to be helpful, you know, please let me know. I'm committed to the cause. You know, I've learned a lot today and really enjoyed sharing with everybody. But I just appreciate the opportunity.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, gentlemen, too, before you all, I guess before we conclude, could you all leave your information in the chat, you know, so students can contact you if they have any further questions after we get off this call about anything pertaining to any of the topics that we discussed today. That most definitely would be greatly appreciated.
I got you.
Yeah,
appreciate that.
Definitely.
And also too, a couple more things before we conclude. Of course, representation matters, and it's very important, students, today as you're going through and you're making decisions on what your careers are going to be and different ways you can be involved in the community politically and understanding the process. What would you tell just young, inspiring students that are trying to get into the law field or the political field? What are some things or some guidance that you would give them as they move forward starting now?
Right now, I would definitely say that mentorship, it should be a priority. It is an invaluable thing to have a mentor, someone who can help guide you along the way. And if you don't have a mentor, I would encourage reaching out to someone who you see doing what you want to do, and ask for a meeting. Ask to get coffee. Well, you can't really go out and get coffee now, but ask for a meeting, a Zoom meeting or something like that, and tell them what you want, what it is that you want to do, who you are, and build relationships that way. Networking is very important. And there is a network of Black professionals out here who are ready and willing and able to assist you in your goals, whether that be in the legal field or in the music field, or policy and medicine, wherever it is. So mentorship, and I don't know if there is a career center. I'm pretty sure it's something of the like on campus. Find that, get connected, and realize that you also have sources, you know, around you. Listen, BAND is such a unique organization because it gathers people from all fields together. Like I wasn't a music major. I was a history major. But I have my line brother, KK Sai, he's a professor at Hampton University. He was a psychology major. And you know, and so it's you know people in different fields now. So don't forsake those relationships that you have in your alumni band network and your and all of that. So yeah, just connections. I'll say networking, connections, mentorship, relationships is something that I would stress that you really take advantage of.
So I think, where it all started for me is when when Mr. Reed made the mistake of making me drum major. Boy, he that was one of the best things that ever happened to me, seriously. And I used that as an opportunity for transfer learning. Um, so this may sound really, really, really small, but I have gone to so many football games at NCCU. Now, I was head drum major or just drum major between the years of 2002 and 2005. It's 2020. I've yet to pay to get in a football game. I've yet to pay for parking. I've yet to pay for a parking ticket, and there are still relationships that I have since then. And I, Reed, they used to pick on me like, Leo, you're always trying to be a showboat. Even when that time he hit me upside the head at Norfolk State when I got out of ranking when he did a split in front of the crowd. That was not part of the show. I say all of that to say, I started building relationships then, and while, this is just one little example of not paying for parking, well, the same guy that was controlling the parking lot then is still controlling the parking lot now. And every time I see him, he says, hey man, how's the restaurant going? I tell everybody about it. Now how many people has this guy told about, to talk about my restaurant to? He sees thousands of people all the time. So that's one thing, that's social capital, right? The other thing is in regards to getting in a particular career, I think you have to have a baseline of who you are as an individual, right? And nobody can tell you how to be you, all right? So however it is that you think, however it is that you're made up, be confident in that and allow mentorship around you to mold you to actually be a part of whatever industry you're going to get in. I graduated Central and became a middle school band director, then a high school band director. And then it's like at that point I started looking at how school actually functioned. And I was like, I want to do a little more. And I became a principal. And then I became a district director for another school district. Then I went into healthcare. I started working with healthcare because I knew that mental health was such an issue for students. And that's when I got a call from Governor Cooper's office. And I started doing executive education policy. And I did not go to school to work on anything policy. I went to school to focus on music, but it was the mentorship around me. It was the people around me that said, you know what, your personality is going to take you far, So I was cemented in who I was as a person, whether I was picked on or not. I found something in me after reflecting that actually gravitated people to me. And I charge each and every last one of you all to do just that. Reflect on who you are as an individual and imagine yourself in these different pools. And I think, one of my guys said earlier, no one is smarter than you. These guys in office, I'm guilty of that as well. I used to think that, wow, they know a lot more than I do. No, they don't. They know that they're confident in who they are. They place themselves in a certain position, and then somebody gives them a packet of information. And then they take that information, and next thing you know, they have that packet of information and you don't. So it appears that they're smarter. So don't let these things that you don't know hold you back because you don't know. All right. So that's the first step. Just get over that fear and just go out there. So stop being in your bubble on campus and start getting involved in the city around you and the state around you. And just get out there, get involved in an internship in DC somewhere, or you want to get into writing, or theater or whatever. Contact one of these celebrities on Instagram, contact their agent, start talking to people. I'll do this thing called, and I'll close with this. I'll do this thing called coffee for nothing. That means I have coffee with people with no set agenda. We're just going to be catching up, talking, having a conversation. I've yet to have a conversation that was not valuable. So my email is in the chat, contact@leonardowilliams.com. Send me an email. If you don't send me an email, I'm gonna be offended. All right, because I can share my experience with you. All right, and I can connect you to people that that I may not have verbalized today. All right. Who knows? I might be sitting in DC somewhere on a council.
Yep. And students, and bear in mind, we are not telling you who to vote for or what party, because we have both Republicans, Democrats, and independent students who voted. The thing is that you should vote. You need to vote. You need to be actively involved in what is important to you. And what I will say is, reaching out to these gentlemen, even if they have different viewpoints than you, we can still go back to being civil with each other, where you can agree to disagree. And it's going to start with you all, because, you all are the future. You all are going to be, some of you all are going to be future mayors and attorneys and all of these things. And you're going to disagree. You're going to disagree at work. You're going to disagree at home. You're going to disagree when you get married. So you're going to have to be able to navigate, those things. And it's important to reach out, because you can learn now from these gentlemen. While they are pretty much rising stars in North Carolina, they were in the band. So they attended an HBCU just like you all. And that's very relatable. And one of them was a band director. So we have a lot of music education majors on here. So that gives you a unique perspective. In the chat, they put their contact information. They also used to call him Reverend Boney. When I announced Reginald Boney as drum major, I announced it as, we're gonna get the anointing on the squad. That was how I announced him to become a drum major. So he went to Duke Divinity School. So he is a great musician. He should have been Sunday's best. He can sing. So you have a lot of talented people that understand music that you have a lot in common with. So though we may disagree with certain things, you'll find that there are a lot more things that we do have in common.
All right. We're going to go ahead and wrap everything up. What we ask is can everyone take your mics off of mute and give our panel a round of applause. Mr. Leonardo Williams, Mr. Reginald Boney, Mr. Jeremy Collins. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure, guys. My pleasure.
So, we appreciate your wisdom. We appreciate these powerful messages, coming from you. Real quick, as we always do, we want to acknowledge some of the supporters on the call. Ms. Asia Reed, appreciate your support. Mr. Roosevelt Pratt, just saw Ms. Jarita Waters. Mr. Gary Bryant is on the call as well. Someone else that you will see very soon. We appreciate any alumni that's on the call, any supporters of our panel that was on the call as well. We appreciate your presence and being here today. Any FSU students that are on the call that are not band members that are on the call. I see we have some on here as well. We appreciate it. And also to students, we appreciate your presence. So please look in the chat and take down the information of our panelists and contact them with any questions that you have. Does anyone have anything final they would like to say to our panel, or anything really quick, or any questions really quickly that you have for our panel before we wrap everything up?
Just want to say 06, Leo.
Hey, mute. You supposed to be on the mute button.
06.
1911. You supposed to be on the mute button. You ain't doing what you're supposed to do.
Yes, 06. And AEA everybody as well. AEA.
Okay, yes, that's the Alpha Epsilon Alpha. I do know that. All right. Well, guys, band next week. Looking forward to this. We have a legend.
Yes.
A legend who will be presenting You know, we had actually had a conversation and discussed it before, but we have the drill master coming in. A lot of you all, if you don't know, now you know. I'm pretty sure that 100% of you all in here have done marched in your band and did a Gary Bryant drill field show, and he's gonna present for us. And I'm looking forward to it myself. He's a very open individual and willing to teach, because I know right now we don't offer the drill writing class, and he's going to talk about his story. We talked about resources at HBCUs. Sometimes that includes personnel and faculty, and you know, we sometimes don't have the course to teaching drills, but here's someone who was very tenacious and took it upon himself to learn how to do it, and really has almost perfected the craft of designing field shows. You know, for pretty much every single band on the East Coast and beyond that. So we're looking forward to that. And then we have two more before can't even say the Thanksgiving break, but before the end of the school year. And we'll wait to see what the university is going to decide as far as the spring semester, because this coronavirus situation is starting to change. So we don't know yet, but good performance yesterday and what we could do and what we were allowed to do. We followed instructions as given by our institution. So good job, guys, in that performance. And I'll find out if we can still come together next week outside, if we can get a space, because right now I understand that everybody's practicing football, volleyball. And so I may have to talk to physical plant to do something about the ants in Seabrook in that grass out there, because we don't want to, you know, get eaten by ants out there, because that's the only field that I can think of right now that's in a good location where we can be outside. So again, thank you. If our guest had anything to say, any closing words or anything, that's fine. If you got an outro, Mr. Chalmers, we can go ahead and start the let out.
Oh, no, you got it, Doc. It's time for the series at the party.
Okay, so replay.
Everybody take care. Be safe. Appreciate you.